Sometimes with optioning a book, you might start looking for a writer, but this was one that felt that it really needed to be driven by a filmmaker's vision before anything. The idea of an alien in our world among us, but in which we were in the point of view of the alien, was an inherently cinematic idea, because that's all about the tools of sound and vision. And this is something that Jonathan obviously extrapolated far, far beyond the literary voice.
There was something really exciting about this idea of seeing things through her eyes, seeing the world through an alien lens, really. That was the North Star of the whole thing, really. And even though, we deviated from that, over the course of many drafts, I think where we came back to was that same impulse, which was to tell a story from her point of view and have an opportunity to, and a challenge, I suppose, of seeing things through a fresh lens,
Really, anything that anybody says you can't do, that's the stuff we've got to do, is the way to almost like guide ourselves a bit, There isn't sort of like a situation or a moment or a sort of a position in space. I think that, we haven't been through it in one way or another in terms of like, a conversation or actually writing it down. But what's interesting is, that's just done in order to sort of have freedom. It's not done in order to sort of like, okay, now let's lock this down. It's done to sort of go, okay, now let's let it off the reins. Let's let life in.
We worked on a script which was much more embellished, much more plot, many more characters, more conventional, actually, I would say. Very good, but we couldn't get the money to make that one. And I'm pleased we couldn't. I never felt 100% comfortable with it. It was a very good script, but it didn't quite concentrate on the kind of molten core of it.
I mean, I'd say almost all of the themes in that iteration survive. It's just sort of told differently.
We could tell the same thing by distilling it. Like, for instance, the creation scene, the beginning scene of the film, which is the eye, started as the construction of the whole body, every aspect of it. Huge, probably a 10-minute scene, £1 million. And it ended up being, the construction of an eye, a rod going into a sphere that you might think is a kind of the alignment of a planet or spaceships docking or something. And actually it's the formation of an eye. And then the scene that we had in an earlier script, which was this training, these sort of voice exercises and voice coaching and all that, became the things, the very thing that Scarlett had to do to learn how to speak with an English accent. So we used those. So an I with those sounds was a distillation of a much longer, earlier incarnation of the same idea. So having spent, many, many months and years working on scenes that were so important to us, suddenly we were just, jettisoning, really, and it was very liberating. And her story and everything that was about her suddenly came back to the fore.
We did, in truth, like really sort of examine it from all angles. So there was sort of really a broad sort of, look at what might happen in sort of every possible situation. So that was all sort of there as a sort of a safety net almost, like what if this happens, what would we do, or what would be the way around that, or how would we pull out of that, or how would that connect with the story?
Walter and I were trying to find ways of describing that entity by putting it in situations, where we were faced with things that were intensely human, that we get, emotion. We would have emotional responses to that can only be human. And then we watch her response to the same thing and see that she's not responding the way we are. She's not feeling anything. And then we just keep layering that on,
There's a moment whenever he was shooting that kid, and the kid tries to stand up, and it's so fucking heroic. It's like that kid has learned to sort of walk in the horror of that moment, in the depths of that moment, he's going to get on his feet, and that actually to me is like the frame of the film that I love, it's just that kid trying to stand up.
The way we are getting inside that alien's head is by looking at us as if we were a foreign object.
We wanted to present the idea that this alien entity wanted us for something, but what exactly they wanted us for, wasn't necessary. You can't show an alien entity; it's not possible. But you can allude to one. You can allude to the idea of it, or the feeling of it, the dread of it. She's not really a she, even, is she? She's an it, and it is a force. It's a dispassionate. It's a dispassionate entity. It's like the sea, you know. The craft was her, you know. The spaceship was her. The body as craft. I mean, that's very much the sort of a central idea in the film. The paradox of body and soul, you know. So that was our science fiction. She's our science fiction.